Hello and welcome to another episode of the Baron Earl Show. We have another one of, apparently Mike Barron has started a cult in Colorado, and that's why all of these talented people are living in Colorado now. But, which, I mean, hey, in Florida right now, where I am, it's a lot warmer, I'll just say. But, Mike,
We would be interviewing Pat Broderick if he had a computer.
hey, I'm sure you can find a way. You can break
Right.
into his house or something.
Okay.
Well, Mike, you want to introduce your buddy?
Yeah, Greg's an old friend of mine who was very active in the comic field, and in fact illustrated several issues of Nexus, which is how I got to know him. And you can imagine my shock and surprise when I moved out here and found that Greg was living right up the road in Wellington. But Greg has been working for the Disney Corporation for a number of years now. And Greg, why don't you tell us how you hooked up with Disney and what you do for them?
Well, I of course was a big fan of animation growing up. But animation seemed like magic. Comics, I could kind of see how that was done. I knew a guy sat in a room, drew them, and went from there. And so that was always what I wanted to do. I wanted to draw comics, and I tried for years to break into that business. And I actually met Mike and Steve Rude in Minneapolis at a Comic-Con there at the, I think, Leamington Hotel, when everybody was just getting started. I mean,
Yep.
These guys were getting started. They had the comic with the record on it and all that stuff. And they were really great guys, spending a lot of time talking to people who, I hadn't done anything. And I tried to get in the business for a number of years. And finally, when I finally learned how to actually put something together that an editor or somebody could judge my work on instead of just people running at camera, I think it was Chicago, and I showed DC and I showed First Comics my stuff, and I got a job offer from each of them. So one was Nexus and one was a book called I can't remember what it was called, but it never happened. Eventually the job I got was Hawk and Dove at DC. And I loved Nexus. I had every issue. It was great. And also, it was going to be a 3-issue deal. And DC wanted to give me a series. And so it was a tough choice. And so I picked both of them. I talked to Mike Carlin, and Mike Carlin, who was editing the Superman books and Hawk and Dove at the time, said, I will help by doing layouts for you. And you'll take both of these projects. And of course, anybody that's ever done comics knows that's impossible. But I'd never done it, so I didn't know any better. And Mike Barron was really willing to do it, and he would send roughs.
That's how I drew in those days. That's how I wrote. I mean, I wrote for at least 15 years. I wrote by drawing each page out by hand.
Yeah, and that was very helpful. And so I just about died. And I did that, and I did 3 issues of Nexus and loved doing it. And then I went on to DC, and I worked at DC for, I think, 4 years doing Hawk and Dove. And then the book got canceled. And it got canceled because they wanted to take a DC character and make him a villain. And they picked Captain Atom. But I think Mike Gold or somebody revealed that on a radio show, and so then they decided not to do that character because they wanted to be a big surprise, and so they made it Hawk from my book, and so they canceled that series. And just about the time I was finishing up, I got a call from a friend of mine who I just knew vaguely from an animation studio I worked at really right out of school for a year. And he remembered me and offered me a job at Disney. And so I flew out there, and of course I was going to take it. My book was canceled and it was Disney. And so I went out there, and I was a prop designer on Darkwing Duck was my first job. And prop designed on a couple other shows after that, Quack Pack and Aladdin. And, this was about the time Disney had this block of 4 shows called the Disney Afternoon. And so there's a lot of work for everybody. It was just starting up, and And I had never designed anything for animation, but after a few years of that, they found out that I worked for DC, and they had this show coming up called Gargoyles, and I got to design the main characters for that. And after that, I was a character designer, and so I've been there many, many, many years now, since 1991.
So as a prop designer, was that kind of like you drawing from each side of whatever the props were?
Right. Anything is a prop in an animated cartoon,
Right.
That doesn't speak. And
Right.
it gets a little shaky about robots and stuff like that.
Right,
Sometimes I do the robots, and sometimes the prop guy does the robots.
Yeah.
But if Darkwing Duck would run into a room and he would pick up a TV and throw it through a window, I'd have to design the TV front and back, 3/4 front, 3/4 back, and then the window, the piece is broken because the window breaks.
Right.
The background guy drew the window, but I had to draw the shards of glass that flew out. So, and I could only do that so long. I wanted to do characters, and luckily with Gargoyles, I got a chance, and it worked out fairly well. So it's a great show, and I had a lot of fun working on it.
Did you have any story input?
Back in those days, yes, you could say, I want, it'd be cool if this was blah, blah, blah. And sometimes it would become an element in the story. But now everything is written before I see it. Although I still can say, wouldn't this be cool if this thing did this and that? And sometimes then the storyboard people, what I do is I get a script, and then, this is traditionally how we did it. Before Phineas and Ferb, this is traditionally how we did it. I would get a script. I would go through the script. Production coordinator would pull all the characters out. I'd read the script, and then design the characters for the storyboard guy. And then we would pick up any ancillary characters that hadn't been taken care of off the storyboards that were done. Well, on Phineas and Ferb, it's a storyboard-driven show. So what would happen is there'd be a script, but the storyboard guys have a lot of flexibility in coming up with really what you see on screen. So I will design a certain amount of characters before they go into production, because they're important characters and they need that in order to storyboard it. And then once the storyboards are done, I get the list back, and then I go around and do all those other characters. So at that point, you can influence a lot of cool stuff, because the storyboard guys have already kind of laid it out what you need to do. So.
Well, how are you working from Colorado? Do you do it all over the internet?
Yep. Initially, when I started on Darkwing Duck, I worked in-house in Burbank at the studio. And of course, we moved all over the place. We started out, what people don't know about Burbank is almost, every 12 feet, there's an animation studio that nobody knows it's there. And it was a long time before I actually ended up on the lot. And it was cool working on the lot, because you could be look out the window and you can see Wall-E going down the street by himself.
What do you mean?
And they made about 20 Wall-Es that they were going to use at movie theaters, I guess. And I don't know if they ever used any of them, but they actually had working Wall-Es that could do certain things, stuff like that. So that was always kind of neat. And, I worked on the lot for a while, and, that is cool, because that's where Walt Disney was. And most of the buildings on the lot aren't actually used for, they have little ink and paint signs and stuff. Of course, nobody does ink and paint anymore. It all went over to computers, but it was great working there. But then in about 2006, I moved to Colorado. My wife's mom was sick. And, I just started on Phineas and Ferb. I mean, I'm probably 3 months into the project. And I said, it looks like I'm going to have to go to Colorado. And they said, well, are you a professional? And I said, yeah. And they said, well, can you do it from Colorado? And I said, I think so. And I moved here, and initially I shipped everything just like I used to do when I was drawing comics. UPS would take, overnight would take your artwork, and they'd have it there the next day, and they'd ship me back the changes. But now I have a Cintiq computer which you draw directly on, and I can be talking to them on the phone, drop it in a secure FTP site, and they can see it while I'm talking to them. So, and now of course with COVID, everybody's doing this. Even the people that live in Burbank, there's no studio. The studios are all closed, and the people that live in Burbank are doing exactly what I'd done for 12 years before COVID. So my work life didn't really change over this, but a lot of people had a hard time getting used to it. But I was kind of used to it anyway, because drawing comics is, as Mike knows, it's a solitary, you're in your room and you send the stuff off, and the only time you get a phone call is if they've got a problem with it, and then you fix it and send it back. So I was used to doing this for years before.
I joke that comic book creators and writers have been preparing for this pandemic their whole lives.
Yeah. And I'd been doing things on a Cintiq. It was hard for me. It was weird because what I do is I live here and I work here. And then every 5 weeks I'd go to California and work in-house for a week, or sometimes 2 weeks. And that's so that everybody just doesn't assume I'm dead. If they don't see you every day, and it's good to, have some interaction with the crew. And luckily I'd been at Disney so long that most of the people I'd worked with somewhere along the line, for the 15 years I was in-house. So what I would do is I'd go back there. I have a good friend, great artist named Toby Shelton, who would put me up for a week, and him and his family. And then I'd work in-house, and then I'd come back here. So, it's good to be there, and it's good to get to know everybody and get some of the perks like the free breakfasts and all that stuff they have there for you.
When was the last time you were in California?
It was the March of when all this started.
Oh, really?
I was actually in California when all this started kind of coming out, and then I went there, and people were starting to panic while I was there. And so I went to the grocery store looking for some, hand stuff and anything I could find. And of course, it was all gone.
Yeah.
So what I did is I went up to those, they have those things you use to wipe off your grocery cart. I got a bunch of those and a can of Lysol, and I got a bunch of Ziplocs, and I just sprayed, saturated them with Lysol and used those to get home. And I haven't been there since, although we have Zoom calls all the time.
Right.
And so I kind of know people. I've made friends that I talk to all the time on Zoom that I've never actually met. So it's an interesting situation.
How long have you been on Phineas and Ferb?
Well, I was on Phineas and Ferb for about 6 years. And then we moved on to a show called Milo Murphy's Law, which was kind of a rough spin-off of Phineas and Ferb. They show up on it, and Doofenshmirtz shows up on it, and worked on that for a couple of years. And then I went to Bento Box, which was another studio, oddly right in the same campus as the Disney TVA, Disney Television Animation. And I worked on a show called Central Park for a couple of years. And now I'm back at Disney with the Phineas and Ferb guys, doing a new show called Hamster and Gretel, which is about the premise that there's Kevin, who's the 16-year-old brother, is driving the minivan, and in the back seat is his little sister Gretel and her hamster called Hamster. And they're driving down the street, and this giant spaceship comes down and says, "We are going to give you powers unimaginable." And of course, she starts saying, "Oh, you mean like super speed and flight and super strength?" And they go, "Oh, okay, you can imagine them, but 2 of you will be given powers." And of course, the 2 that are given powers our hamster, the hamster, and Gretel, the little girl, and the brother gets nothing. So, it's a great show. It's got a song per episode, a couple of them sometimes. And, moves really, it's really slick production because I've worked with these people for so long. Animation is a little like comics, and it takes more than one person to do it generally. But it takes a lot of people to do animation. And so you've got to have a really good working relationship with your people and your crew. And everybody's great on this show. So
where can people see this show?
It's on Disney Plus and Disney. It hasn't actually aired yet. I think it's going to be on the Disney Channel and Disney Plus. I don't know if everything's coming out at the same time. So we've got just a rough air date of August. Is coming August. So we'll see if that happens. Sometimes things get.
Do you get free Disney Channel?
I do not. But I do get a silver pass where I get to go to the parks if they ever open. I guess they're kind of open now, but even when with our what's called the silver pass that I've had for years and years when I lived out in California, I think my daughter grew up at Disneyland basically because they go, every couple of weeks. And by the time we were getting ready to come here, everybody was I said, aren't you going to miss Disneyland? My daughter was in 4th grade. No, we've seen. And now, of course, whenever I say, should we go to Disneyland? Oh, everybody goes nuts and everybody tries to get on the bandwagon to go too. But it's just recently, of course, they've opened again. And it's just very recently that our silver passes have worked because, of course, they want to bring in paying customers, not the freeloaders that we are.
Yeah. I was going to ask, is the from when you started to now, I know there's always been a lot of people involved with animation just because of all the different parts, but has the size grown to even more now, or is it about the same or a little less?
I'd have to say it's grown because
I see more names. That's why I ask.
Well, with the advent of the computer, a lot of people think that now because Disney's using computers to do this stuff, that there's no artists involved. It's all done by the computer.
Yeah.
It's still all done just the same way it has ever been. It's like, as Mike knows, writing hasn't changed. It's just writing on a different tool.
Yeah.
But the thing about the shows have changed is the expanse of the shows have changed. It used to be like there were, the 10 things in TV animation at least, because the budgets are much smaller. You should never do theme parks, confetti, large crowds of people, moving vehicles, and it goes on and on and on. But now, one of the good things about the computer is if you need to draw somebody in a pickup truck driving away from camera, that can be a version of CG so that it doesn't, how in comics they used to wiggle around as they move.
Right.
Now it's all done with the computer. And so because of that, the stories have widened. You can do confetti, you can do theme parks, you can do all this other stuff. And so, it isn't as restrictive as far as the stories you're telling. And because of that, of course, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so because of that, you need more and more artists. So on the show I am right now, I've got, usually on a show, I've got, it's me and another character designer.
Yeah.
And now on this show, we've got 2 other character designers.
Wow.
So, and it doesn't seem like I have any less work to do. So.
Is this Hamster and Gretel?
Yeah. And, it's been going like that for the last 10 years. So, but this is the first show I've ever had 2 people working with me on a show.
Wow.
Greg, when I was in Boston, I interviewed Chuck Jones.
Oh, yeah? That would have been great.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
Yeah. He really did some miraculous stuff in his day.
Oh, yeah. He was, in many ways, father of modern animation, at least one of them.
Yeah.
But he was with Warner Brothers.
Yeah, I had my first boss when I came out and worked on Darkwing Duck was named Alan Zaslov. And Alan Zaslov worked with all those guys in Termite Terrace when they were developing all those when Bugs and all those guys were just getting started and they weren't fully formed yet. And he had great stories to tell about, all the horrible stuff they would do to each other. I mean, it was,
Oh, man.
there was, they do stuff like make blow guns out of animation cells and put push pins in them and shoot them at each other. And you could get those push pins. We used to do that at the animation studio I worked for, and you could get those push pins stuck in a solid piece of wood pretty well. And
Sure.
the cool thing is Alan also, he had a long career. He went from Warner Brothers to UPA, and he worked on, Gerald McBoing, and he worked on the Charlie Brown Christmas show. And so every time we watch it every year, I say, hey, there's Alan's name. Sadly, just passed away maybe 2 years ago. And but he was a great boss to have because he had also taught animation and taught art. And I was just coming off Hawk and Dove, and I learned drawing comics from looking at Neil Adams and Jack Kirby and Will Eisner and Mobius and all these guys, all these weird styles that somehow meshed into my style. And I never really had any art training. I learned from looking at the way, and you look at a knee drawn by Neil Adams as opposed to a knee drawn by Jack Kirby, they're not
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I mean, that you draw so well without having had any formal training. Well, what about human anatomy? Did you ever do life drawing?
I did some life drawing finally when I got out of school. I went to school in Minnesota, and drawing the human form in the form of a real person wouldn't have gone over. But when I worked at the animation studio, they actually had people come in, nude models, and we drew from them. And once you get past there's a naked person standing right in front of me. It's the only way to learn. I mean, and of course, when I would talk to Alan about that, he'd say, Guler, you don't even know how to draw a knee. And I would say, well, show me how to draw a knee. I'm too old to show everybody. But, when you think about, somebody like Steve Rude, his anatomy is flawless. And I'm sure he learned out of all those, and I'm blanking on the artist, Loomis.
He worships Loomis.
Yeah, Andrew Loomis.
And the funny thing about dude is he never stops learning. He's still studying techniques.
Yeah, and that's really what you have to do. I mean, once you get past the fact that I think a lot of people, when they draw, they just see lines. They're just worried about the lines they're putting on the paper. But, you have to build a form. You have to build a shape. And you have to trick the eye into thinking that these lines on this 2D surface is a 3D thing in space. And, that's how you build everything out of shapes. Yeah. You build everything out of ball. You take a circle, you turn it into a ball, and that's how you end up with Mickey's head. But, now you can go on YouTube or anywhere and get tutorials on anatomy and get all that stuff. But of course, when I was coming up, we had like 3 books. So
what were they?
Well, one was How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way.
Right. And
then there was a Disney book about the making of Sleeping Beauty. And then of course those Loomis books were floating around, but I don't, they were all out of print. So someone had Xeroxed all these copies of these books, and they were all held together by push pins. And I had a partial one of those. And then of course I had those Walter Foster animation books and how to draw for animation that I think were done in the 40s, because I've seen originally there's a cat and a mouse having a fight, and originally they were Tom and Jerry, and they were Tom and Jerry from the old MGM stuff, and they had to change that for legal reasons, of course. But that's basically all we had. And
the Bern Hogarth books have been around.
Yeah, the Hogarth books were one of the first ones I got too. But then the thing with the Hogarth books is you have to kind of unlearn human anatomy after you spend too much time with those babies, because nobody does anything the way Hogarth drew. I mean, it looks cool when he does it, but if you try to draw it that way and put those characters in a regular scene, everybody's a superhero in your scene. One of the things I did when I was living in Minneapolis in order to get my chance with comics is Mike Carlin used to tell me every day, he said, you draw a great Superman, you draw a great Batman, you draw these great characters in these kind of pinup things, but I need to see a story with regular people in it. And so what I did, I was living in Minneapolis at the time. So I went downtown Minneapolis and I took all these pictures of the streets and buildings and all this stuff. And I thought, what would be great if because I was going to put a jewelry store getting robbed. And so I went into a jewelry store and I said, do you mind if I take some pictures in here? I'm drawing no, that did not go over. They don't want any pictures. But I did go to the Minneapolis Tribune on one Saturday afternoon when I was working. Gosh, why was I working down there actually at that point? I don't know. I must have been working freelancing, starving to death. Anyway, so I went in there and I went into the Minneapolis. You think I would have learned from the jewelry store debacle, but so I went in there and I said, there are two security guys sitting there. And I said, my name is Greg Guler. I'm trying out with the Superman editor, and I'm going to try to do a little story about Superman. And I'd like to take pictures of your newsroom because we didn't have Google. We didn't have any of that stuff. We didn't even have DVDs you could freeze and look at that. And I'd like to use your newsroom as a Daily Planet. Well, initially I didn't tell them that. I just said I'd like to take pictures for an art project I'm working on. And they looked at each other and said, no. And I said, well, here's what it really is. I don't know why I went on with the story because their no was pretty no. Anyway, so I said, I'm trying to try out for a Superman thing, and I want to use the Daily Planet. They looked at each other and reached under the desk and brought out huge stacks of comics. Both the guys were comic fans. And so they took me on a tour of the newsroom, and I got to take all these pictures. And that was the 7 or 8 page story, no lettering or dialogue or anything that I did, of Clark walking down the street in Metropolis, gets into an elevator with a girl who's delivering things. A beam comes into the elevator and, of course, vaporizes her and vaporizes Clark's clothes. And it's Superman, and he pulls out the burning shards of his clothes, and he goes in there, and there's a giant monster wrecking everything. And that's the job that got me the Nexus thing and the Hawk and Dove thing. So don't be afraid to ask the dumb question.
So you brought the whole nude modeling thing into your pitch for the.
Well, Clark wasn't nude.
I know.
And the girl was really nude because she had no flesh.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah. So
I would say that if you're going to copy human anatomy from a comic book artist, that Neil Adams is probably your best choice because his understanding of anatomy is better than most, and his figures are unusually realistic.
Yeah, when he came out, my eyes lit up when I saw his stuff. I'd buy anything he did, and of course, trying to draw like Neil Adams. Initially you would think that Jack Kirby would be easier, but Jack Kirby knew all that stuff. He knew all that anatomy. He just chose to do his own thing and built on top of the Neil Adams type anatomy stuff. But yeah, Neil Adams. I tell Steranko, Neil Adams, Eisner, those guys. I got those. Harvey put out those 3 issues of, or maybe it was just 2, The Spirit, and I'll tell you that blew my mind. I just couldn't. These were weird. These are so weird and unlike any comics I'd ever seen in my life. Eisner was great, and Neil Adams is great and still great.
Yeah, he's one of those guys who hasn't lost a stitch as he gets older. And Neil's got to be 80 by now, and he's still drawing. Yeah, and it still looks great. It's just remarkable because, unfortunately, we all know a number of great artists who deteriorated as they got older.
Yeah, and I think Jack Kirby was one of them. I don't know if he's just trying to work too fast or, another thing is I used to be able to work late into the night after night after night. And I can't do that now. If I work till 3 a.m, I'm shot the next day. And I'm sure Jack Kirby was used to doing 5 pages a day, and as he got older, he couldn't do 5 pages a day anymore, and he just didn't. Nobody told him the difference. It's too bad that he didn't really get to bathe in the fame of these Marvel movies and that kind of stuff.
I have heard that Marvel settled with his family for a 7 figures.
Yeah.
Have you heard that?
I haven't heard that, but I know that there was, the big dilemma is, Jack's dead, and how much does his family really deserve any of this money? And,
Well, I mean, who give it to? I mean,
Yeah.
they are probably. Well, I don't know if they're the legal owners of his legacy, but Marvel should have done the right thing, and
it was absolutely the right thing that they should have gotten a big, just like the Superman guys that sold that character for pennies, and I've heard both arguments, but I'm always gonna say that the artist's family should benefit from all this, because we couldn't have dreamed. When I was a kid, there was no possible way in my mind that I could have ever thought there'd be an Ant-Man movie.
Right.
Even after Superman came out, how many of us sat there and go, there'll probably be an Ant-Man movie? No.
Moon Knight.
Yeah.
And it was Neil Adams who arranged for Simon and Schuster to get a monthly stipend from Warner Brothers.
I still remember that drawing he did of him, Superman carrying those 2 guys, and yeah, I mean, it's only right, but and I'm so glad that it's happening. Even after the Superman movie, it never occurred to me that anybody would continue Batman movie. We were so surprised that they were going to make a Batman movie. Well, they made a Superman movie. He'd even be easier to make than Superman. I remember back when we were, I think, working on Gargoyles, I was in a conference room with Gary Kreisel, and Gary Kreisel was the president of television animation. And we were sitting there waiting for the meeting to start, and I said, what Disney should do is they should buy the Marvel characters. Because at the time, wasn't Revlon, they were bankrupt, and Revlon was running the company, and it was just a horrible mess. And it was about the time that Fantastic Four movie came out with Canon, or who was it?
You mean the bad Fantastic Four?
Yeah, the one we don't talk about.
Yeah, the one with all the practical effects, and
it was like a Roger Corman movie.
Roger Corman. Anyway, we were sitting there, and I said, they should buy it because, God, they've got such a great pantheon of characters. And Gary turned to me and said, how many people read comic books? And I said, well, not as many as watch movies and TV shows, but think of all the characters you'd have. Someday maybe you'll make a movie. They made a Superman movie and a Batman movie. He could not. All he could think about was the audience that read comics. He couldn't make the jump to, someday maybe there'll be technology that we can make, all this stuff. But and if they'd have bought it then, they would have gotten them for millions of dollars instead of billions.
So you heard it here first, folks. Greg is the father of intellectual properties.
Well, it never went anywhere. He shut me down, but I guess Eisner and those guys had talked about buying Marvel even then, unbeknownst to me. But I'm sure they all wish they'd have done it back when they could have got them for. But see, Hollywood never works that way. They only want a proven entity.
Do you know that there's a fabulous Furry Freak Brothers cartoon show on Tubi? Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it. I've only seen trailers for it.
Well, it's there. I mean, I always thought that Gilbert Sheldon was another genius storyteller, and that his comics were not only brilliantly illustrated, but wonderfully well written and just very lively, just popping off the page with great dialogue and great scenarios. And while I have to give them credit that they preserve a lot of the so-called shady material, It's an adult show. It's
Yeah.
an adult show, but it seems to be aimed pretty low. You should check it out. I mean,
Yeah, I
and
like that.
the animation is crude.
Yeah, and you know, there are some projects and characters that if the cauldron that the Freak Brothers came out of no longer exists. So I can imagine that it's very tough for people who have never heard. I have these Zoom meetings and I'm talking about stuff sometimes, and I can tell that 90% of the people whose faces I'm looking at, they're sitting there slack jawed looking at me. They've never heard of the Universal monster movies, and I'm just sitting there going, wow, there's this gigantic universe of stuff out there that these people have never. And so it's for somebody to come into a project where they're working on the Freak Brothers and trying to even imagine that universe that was then, must be pretty tough.
Well, you do know that all the Universal monsters are in play again, and they're planning films for all of them.
Yeah, and I sure wish they'd make some good ones.
Yeah, I hope so.
I think they've made a couple of them now, thinking that was going to get them off. I think, didn't they make a Dracula and a Wolfman and a
Yeah.
They did make a Wolfman with Benicio del Toro.
Yeah. And I can't remember if I ever saw it, which is not a good sign.
And Anthony Hopkins was in it too. It was right in the middle. It was about as good as a middling Hammer film.
Yeah.
But the production values were great.
Yeah. What I love about the movie, particularly something like The Bride of Frankenstein, is the weird vibe that these movies have.
Well, that's a unique movie.
Every Halloween, I have them on while I'm working, so I'm not really watching them, but occasionally I'll watch them. We have a theater in the basement and watch them there. But there's such a weird vibe to those early ones that they completely lost once they got into the 40s. I mean, and Whale and those guys were all gone. Then they got pretty by the numbers, and even stuff that's pretty good like the Wolfman and some of those. They just don't have that weirdness to them that I like. They were never really scary. I suppose people were scared of them back.
It's true. They were scared in the 30s and 40s when they came out.
But I still love them just because of the weird vibe they've got. I mean,
well, let's face it. I mean, Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein are hugely entertaining movies.
Yeah. And the look of the characters and there's such great makeup design and all that stuff Pierce did. And I love those things. But I could tell I'm talking to these people and they're looking at me like, Invisible Man? Is that the one with, that just came out a little while ago?
Yeah.
I'm saying, no, it doesn't get the woman from Mad Men in it.
The original of Invisible Man is brilliant. I mean, it snaps and pops, and the dialogue is just brilliant.
I think the last time I was listening to it, I was shocked because he starts ranting and raving about all the stuff he can do now that he's invisible, and I can rob and pillage and rape. And I'm sitting there going, wow, this was 1934 or something. The Invisible Man's going around raping people in the movie.
Well, that actually occurred in the Kevin Bacon version.
Oh, yeah, I saw that too, but
The Hollow Man.
Yeah, I can't. That's right. I don't think I can remember it, but
then I saw the new one, and it was very well made, but it didn't work for me, mainly because of the actress they chose. I don't know why they chose her. She just didn't have any appeal. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, I didn't see it either.
She's very hot in Hollywood, so.
She was. I don't know.
She still is. I'm not saying hot as in hot. I'm saying
hot as in popular.
Hot as in popular.
Elizabeth Moss.
Yeah. She's a powerful lady in Hollywood.
Yeah.
She's also really smart too. She's a good writer.
What has she written?
She wrote a lot of Mad Men, actually.
Really?
Really?
I did not know that.
Yeah. I didn't know it either until I was doing some research.
Huh.
But yeah, she's actually done some good stuff. But I feel the same way about a lot of this stuff. I almost I like it better when they set it back in a different time period rather than try to make it modern.
If they can pull it off.
Yeah, when they can pull it off and they do stuff like that. I don't know.
But we have our modern monster classics like Alien and Aliens, which are sui generis. I mean, they've been often imitated but never equaled. And The Thing, Carpenter's remake of The Thing, I think, is far better than the original.
And Disney owns Aliens and Predator now, don't they?
Is that true?
I think they
I don't
do.
know.
I think they do. That's why Marvel has been coming out with Aliens and Predator comics. But
and there's an Aliens and Predator movie too.
Yeah.
In fact, there might be a couple of them.
There's a new Predator. There's a new Predator in the works movie from Disney. I mean, I don't know that it's considered Disney. I don't know who.
Is it a musical?
Yeah. But it actually looks better than the last few Predator movies have. So
that's good. The last one was written and directed by Shane Black, and poor Shane, it stopped his career in its tracks.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's parts of it I loved, but then most of it I was let down.
It must be tough for younger people to come onto these projects, and even Predator and Alien are old now.
That's right.
And to try to. It's such a fine line to walk where you have to take these established things and I know they're tempted to twist everything into something different so that it's more interesting.
Right.
And you have to pick and choose what elements you keep and which ones you jettison.
Well, if it is truly interesting, it will succeed. I mean, good writing is good writing. We've all seen movies recently where it's not good writing. It's all for zingers, back and forth. But we're looking for the writing that reveals character, the twist that makes you reframe everything that you've seen, and wonder about it again. And I'm trying to think of some recent horror films that have done that. And I'm not really up on real recent horror films, but The Ring was a very effective horror film. It was a remake of the Japanese film, and that's honestly a scary movie.
Right.
I mean, that's the test. Is it honestly a scary movie? And movies are the best medium for horror and novels, but movies, because not only they control the pacing and the visuals, but they control the sound. And you don't realize how important sound is until you see a good horror movie.
Yeah. Sound, I think, gets a bad rap in almost every kind of movie. God, I was just watching something recently, and I can't remember what it is now, but I'm going, wow, that sound effect in this thing scared the hell out of people before anything else. And it's the same thing with, all these superhero movies that are out now. As Mike knows better than anybody, DC struggles with this stuff, and Marvel seems to have a better handle on it, which is kind of the opposite of how I thought it was always going to go.
Yeah, it's true.
Because, DC got such an early jump. And
but and the thing is, though, that I've heard, and I kind of agree with, is the DC characters are almost more like archetypes and gods. Like they're like less in touch. They're like less modern than which doesn't mean you can't do them right. You just have to do them differently.
Yeah, you just have to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I mean,
and just like the comics, the difference between Marvel and DC, I think the Marvel movies delve more into character and more into personality and quirky character.
And that's what Marvel always did.
Yeah.
The DC characters were all basically, when Marvel came, hit their heyday, the DC characters were almost all interchangeable. I mean, I don't know how many stories they did where Batman was putting on Superman's suit and pretending to be Superman. And that's a illustration of how they were,
right.
Aquaman didn't have a personality. Batman wasn't this twisted character, that beat the hell out of everybody. And they were basically the same guy.
What was that era? They called that DC era. It was a certain editor. They had one editor there who was always into gimmicks, and wasn't so much story. It's just what's a good
giant typewriters and and
Who was that
butt-headed
guy?
Superman and that kind of stuff. Mort Weisinger.
It wasn't Mort Weisinger. I think that's what I was going to say.
Yeah. And those were very charming stories, but of course you couldn't make a live action movie of that stuff now.
No,
But
they had no emotional impact.
yeah, something, the Spider-Verse movie, the animated one, I thought was brilliant in its, how they took characters like the Prowler, who was never really scary before, terrifying in this movie.
Right.
I mean,
Watch
what
that.
if
Mike, you haven't watched that? Gosh,
you got to see that one.
I said it so many times.
Into the Spider-Verse, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
Into the Spider-Verse.
Okay.
It's one of the best Spider-Man movies.
The only problem I have with it is Peter Parker's my Spider-Man. I'm too old to switch Spider-Man.
Oh, brother.
And he's in it, but it focuses on Miles Morales, who's entertaining too.
They're bringing out a new Spider-Man who's an Inuit.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Well,
no.
There you go.
I would believe it. They have a multiverse of them.
Yeah. And this last Spider-Man movie dealt with that, and the Doctor Strange movie is going to do that too, and so we'll see. It's great that I remember being in a meeting back at Disney. We were working on Gargoyles, and I said, couldn't we have these characters go into another dimension? And everybody at the table, well, not the artists and the creative people, but the executives go, nobody understands going into another dimension. You don't have to explain so much to it. I said they've been doing it in comics for like 40 years by this time.
But that's what they did so great with the Into the Spider-Verse movie, because that's what I sat like, and I was just like shocked, because I'm like, they communicated a complicated idea in a really clear, simple way. And it's like, and it really worked. And that's so hard to do, to communicate something like that. But I was like, man, they did great. But they had great writers and stuff on that.
Well, after Infinity War and all that stuff, anybody will buy anything if you can explain it and make it even vaguely real, even vaguely understandable. Which is all they did in the comics. I mean, they didn't go into Crisis of Infinite Earth, didn't go into all the hoorah of all that stuff, but people bought it, and comic fans, of course, have an open mind to all that stuff. Star Trek did it in 65 or 7 or something like that. So it's nice to see them moving outside the straight, when I was talking to my grandson the other day, and I was telling him about the Spider-Man TV show, the live action one with Nicholas Hammond as Spider-Man. And then of course it led to the Hulk. And he was asking me, so who are the villains? And I'll be damned if I could tell him one of the villains. I couldn't remember any of the bad guys in any of those things, because they're always guys in motorcycle gangs, and there were no super villains in those shows. I think on the old Flash TV show there was the Trickster, or somebody else showed it a few times. But how would you even write? Now that they're bringing all the super villains and stuff in, it'd be tough to even write. Okay, who's going to tangle with the Hulk? Yeah. And they did it for I don't know how many seasons, but I can't tell you any of them who the bad guys were in any of those things. I mean, it seems guys on motorcycles, it seems like who always was.
Yeah.
They're always picking on guys on motorcycles.
They were always the bad guys.
So, Greg, do you have an original project of your own that you've been dreaming about or would like to get off the ground?
I do have a number of them, but I had an original thing I put out years ago called Captain Phil and the Intergalactic Space Pals, which was going to be a parody of all these groups that everybody gets along so well. And, it was about this guy, Captain Phil, and he had these kids around him that, were orphans from an intergalactic space orphanage. And I did a couple of issues of it as a comic book. And over the years, of course, I've worked on many animation projects that never came to pass. Actually, we have one that we're working on right now that we've been working on for 20 years, and it's possible that it may occur. But what happens in Hollywood with animation projects is you'll go around and pitch to all these studios, and the executives switch over so many times that if you pitch something to a group of
Yep, I know how that goes.
and they all leave or get fired or whatever happens, then your project's dead in the water.
Right.
Because nobody else wants to look at anybody else's project and bring it back. And we were so close at Warner Brothers one time with this, and that exactly happened. We got a phone call that the whole creative executive team had been purged, and they were all gone. And but the other good thing about it, when that happens, you can, if you wait a little while, you can go pitch it again. And now the guy that handed you a bottle of water at the first meeting is an executive, and he remembers you vaguely, and so you've got it in there. But I've got a couple of things that are floating around out there. But now I'm starting to think that I'm so old that everything I would like to see on TV, nobody else would like to see.
Never say that.
Yeah.
Greg, do you still have copies of Captain Phil?
I think I do have a copy of it around here somewhere. As a matter of fact, somebody on Facebook just found the one I gave them all those years ago. And I was getting all these messages from people that I've still got mine. I've still got mine.
See if you got enough copies to swap books with me.
Oh, okay. I'll see if I can track a couple down and see what we get. I know I've got the artwork, the original artwork. And I was at one point was scanning it, and I was going to, compile it, and for anybody that wanted to see it. I actually did a second issue, but of course it was so long from the first issue to the second issue that I couldn't get any orders on the second one. But yeah, that was, and it was back in those days, before you're married and before you got anything else going on, all I did was work. Right. So, you have your job, whatever that was, and go home and draw comics all night. But you can't do that very long. So, yeah, everything kind of slides by the way. You have to make a living, and you have to put your hours in on that and concentrate on that, I guess. But yeah, there's a few things out there yet I'd still like to pitch. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Are they all animated projects?
Well, right now they are, but they could easily be comics also. Wolfman. So
Wolfman is hot right now. Werewolves are hot.
Yeah.
I'm doing a Western with Pat Broderick that involves a werewolf.
I think I saw some pages of that somewhere.
We've been posting them. It's the best work of Pat's career. It's just mind-blowing.
Yeah. God, I always liked his stuff too. There's so much energy to all his stuff. Yeah, it's funny. The big comics purge of the middle 90s, when, if you'd been in the business a while, you couldn't get a job. So everybody went to animation, or they went somewhere. So, that's what happened to me. And I know quite a few guys. Dusty Abel is at Warner Brothers, and he's been there a long time, and a number of other people. So animation's been good to us.
Yeah. Well, I'd say, yeah. Hey, if you had jobs on and off, and it seems like it's not as bad to go from one studio to another, because I hear a lot of stories of people kind of going away and then coming back to the same studio. So it seems like,
because everybody, you go to these cubicles, you go to these studios, and they're virtually, you can't distinguish one from another, because they're all cubicles with all these action figures and toys and pictures and all the stuff we've all worked on. And everybody likes the same stuff. You got a few oddballs in there once in a while that, have other stuff up, but mostly it's, a lot of anime, a lot of comic book stuff. And it was fun. It's funny because I've been in the business so long now that sometimes in a meeting, I'll say, so what have you worked on before? And I'll say, well, Darkwing Duck, and all these people's jaws hit the table because I watched that when I was 4.
Yeah.
Well, that's, you made my childhood, and all that.
Yeah.
I was at Disney back before everything went to hell, and working in my cubicle. And when I'd go there, I'd work late into the night because I didn't want to go and intrude on the family I stay with, So I'd just be there working on stuff, and I'm sitting there working, and I look up, and there's two young guys standing there, and they're looking at me, and I said, "Hi, can I help you with something?" And they said, "We just found out that you worked on Darkwing Duck." I said, "Yeah," and they're just, "Wow, that's so cool." And they were like all, much like I would have been if I would have ran into Neil Adams.
Right.
I can't imagine what would have happened. I would have probably.
Well, you've met Neil Adams, haven't you?
I have met him.
Yeah.
I sat next to him at the Denver Con the first time we were there, and I went up and shook his hand, and the first thing he told me was I was charging too little for what I was selling. And he said that you should never charge less than $20 for anything, because that's how much money, that's how it comes out of the ATM.
Yeah.
So I got a good lesson from Neil about that. But he was very impressed that I'd been at Disney for 20 years at that point. He reached out and shook my hand, because I think Neil really has an appreciation for people who can stay in the business a long time. He seems like somebody who's quite a realist about the business. And what's amazing is, you meet people like that. You meet people that are your heroes, creative heroes. And, every time I do, I try to say something that means something to them, but I realize that everybody's already said everything 1,000 times to these guys about their influence they had on you. And what I did meet Forey Ackerman, famous monsters guy, and at a con, and I had my stepson with me, and this means nothing to him, but it meant something to me. And so I walked up to him and I said, "Mr. Ackerman, I can't, I know everybody, including Steven Spielberg, has already said this to you, but when Famous Monsters of Filmland came to my door, it was like Christmas."
Yeah.
And he got tears in his eyes when I told him that. And so it must not matter how many times somebody tells you something that you've heard a million times. And I asked him to show my stepson the Dracula ring, and of course he had it on.
Great.
So
nice.
It meant nothing to Ryan, but it meant a lot to me.
That's awesome, though. Is there anywhere online or that you prefer people to stalk you?
Well, they can find me at GREG GULER Designs. I've
Okay.
got a website there, and I don't. Other than that, I don't really. I get phone calls all the time from people who want to talk to me about my work. And, I feel kind of bad for them because they always sound so nervous. But and they're all people. They're always people who want to get into the business. They want to be a writer, or they want to be
right
or something. And so I talked to them for a little while, but they just want to keep asking the questions, and sometimes it get a little tough because I've got to get back to work. But
just say the dog is vomiting on the yard, the carpet. I have to go.
Okay, I thought I heard some growling. All right.
Well,
thanks, Greg.
On that note, thank you very much. Oops, sorry.
That's okay.
I can go back, but I can hang up and let you go too.
No, I can hang out for a little longer.
A little more. Yeah, no. Oh, you know what? I did want to ask you, especially, and I know this would be boring for Mike probably, but for like Phineas and Ferb and for your other show, do you guys do any 3D models that they do like the 2D animation on top of or anything?
Yeah,
or?
we vehicles, mostly vehicles, spaceships, sometimes robots. Particularly if we have 100 robots in a scene, it's all some sort of outline CG that they use, and we have a kind of a library of vehicles like trucks and cars and stuff like that. So no more no more spaceships shimmering as they go away from you and that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
we do some of that.
Yeah, no, I've just I know a bit about animation because I was really interested in it when I was coming up, and it is really interesting to me too, like how and especially a lot of pixel artists know this, but like the how they'll take how especially in like 2D animation, more like fun or comedy stuff, they'll take the form and kind of squish it out or stretch it
Yeah.
depending upon like when it's landing or bouncing, and
Throw a little squash and stretch in
yeah,
there,
and
so it
just
seems a little more animated. Yeah.
do different stuff like that. Yeah, that's I don't know, just all of the techniques and things that a lot of times people don't even really realize is happening.
No, I think
But
most, people who just watch this stuff for fun and don't know that much about it assume that everything is animated that way.
right,
They don't know. They don't think that there's still people out there doing animation and by hand.
right,
And it happened fast at Disney. I like I was saying, I go back there every 5 weeks or so and work in house. And one minute everybody's working on traditional animation, which was basically the same way that Walt Disney did it in 1928 with a turntable, and you'd flip drawings and all this stuff.
right,
And the next time I went out there, everybody had a Cintiq and were drawing on pixels.
right.
And it's very tough to continue to do output and learn how to do this new technology. It's in some ways counterintuitive to what you've always done.
Right.
And but we managed to do it somehow. And now I still sketch everything out on paper because that's how
Yeah.
my brain thinks. And then I scan it into the machine with the machine back there, and then I work on it with the Cintiq and the computer. So it's basically a hand drawn. Everything is still hand drawn. It's just
Right.
you're drawing it with a different tool. So
Yeah. Yeah. I can't imagine. I know my buddy, when he was starting to do some of that and getting into digital like illustration and stuff, he was doing it before they had a lot where you could actually look at the screen while you were doing it.
right,
Like you had to draw it, when you had to draw down here and like look
Wacom
up here
tablet.
to what I was
Yeah,
like that. I was like, man, my brain cannot.
yeah. I have one, and I never could figure it out. I mean,
It's
I just can't. I can't look at something and draw down here. That's just so
it's
now I've
yeah,
got a Cintiq right sitting here next to me,
yeah,
and it's you're drawing up like this, but you're still
right,
drawing. Yeah, I could never figure out a Wacom tablet. My wife got me one, and it's
yeah,
back there somewhere in the archives. Uh, maybe somebody will want it someday, but
yeah.
yeah, and everything upgrades so completely that
Oh
every
yeah,
15 years or so you got to get a new computer. Whether or not you're the one you've got works fine. It's just that
right,
it can't support all these new, like Zoom even. And
yeah,
we started going to these Zoom meetings. I had to get a new computer just so I could do it.
yeah. And I'm sure even with just being a professional and being able to send stuff, yeah, to people that they can actually use. I mean, you have
Right.
to.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to keep up with the technology. And it's not the fun part of art. It's not what I got. When I got into it, it was drawing with a piece of paper that they've done it since day one.
Yeah,
And then you got to, continually, and occasionally you'll get to the point where you just say, the hell with it. I don't want to learn a new thing anymore. I'm going to go
right.
sit at the beach. But
Yeah,
that's how it is.
yeah, yeah. Do you have any thoughts on like kind of the future of the animation industry, or like where you
Well,
think it's kind of heading?
I think the voracious beast that is streaming is going to eat as much as it can.
Yeah,
The only place where things will level out is whether or not people will be willing to pay for it.
yeah,
During this COVID time, animation has just boomed
yeah,
because they just need more and more product.
yeah,
And Apple Plus, Disney Plus, HBO, DC, everybody's got their own streaming service,
yeah.
and everybody jumped on that bandwagon. So because they didn't want to pay for cable
Right.
was getting too expensive. Well, now it's going to be even more expensive
Yeah,
because if you want to watch, it started with Game of Thrones, everybody got HBO.
right.
But if you want to watch the Star Trek stuff, if you want to watch the DC stuff, you want to watch the, just all kinds of stuff that's out there, you've got to have all these different platforms. And eventually people are going to say, well, I can't afford anymore. And then I think what they're going to do is you'll be able to pick what shows you want,
Yeah,
and you'll be able to program them that way, and you'll only pay for what you're watching. I mean, we've got Netflix, and I go on Netflix. I've never watched 90% of this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's a voracious animal. I mean, cable was voracious, but this streaming is way, way more. There just needs more product all the time.
Oh yeah.
And people are getting more and more impatient.
Yep.
Because you and I know that back when we had 3 networks, you waited a week to see what you wanted to watch, and
oh yeah,
if you missed it, you missed it. And then technology changed and changed and changed, and we had cable where you have 700 channels, and it's just going to continue to change. And A, you're not going to want to pay for everything. B,
right.
You got to work some and sleep sometime.
Yeah.
So, you can't sit there. People. I'm astonished that people can watch as much as they do.
Yeah.
I've got friends that I talk to them. It seems like they watch everything, and I don't know how they can possibly do it.
Well, so many, because it's so easy now. They'll just do it when they're sitting waiting for a bus, or while they're falling asleep, or I mean, it's like I know, like, when you really like something or you're into it, then you'll fit it in whenever. It's like I'm watching it during lunch or what.
Yeah. And not only that, but everything, it all drops at once. So you've got 13 episodes. It's amazing, when I tell, younger people about the fact that a season of TV used to be 39 episodes.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And now it's 13. The original Star Trek, 39 episodes. They did it in a season.
Yeah.
And now they do 13 or 8.
Yeah.
And then you have to wait a year for the next 8 to come out.
Yeah.
So, in many ways, it's the golden age of TV.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But when you also think about how much it costs.
Oh, yeah.
I heard somebody say the other day that one episode of these new Star Trek series is more than the entire budget of all 79 of the original shows.
I mean, I know when I had started watching, I was like, this is, especially, I think it was like the second season of Discovery. I was like, this looks as good as any movies that are out. Like the special effects. I mean, they were like blowing me away. I was just like, I can't. I mean, imagine how much but they're smart to put that much into it, because it has made it like there's a lot of people that will do Paramount Plus, or they'll do the I think you can add it to like Amazon Prime and stuff, and some things
and what these creators know that the guys that did the original Star Trek didn't, is that people are going to be watching this 50 years from now.
Right.
I'll bet you anything that the guys that put those original shows out are going, are you kidding me? William Shatner probably sits there and goes, never in a million years do we think this would be happening.
Oh yeah.
Watching it again and because there was no syndication. There were some reruns.
Right.
And when people ask him questions about, so when you filmed this episode, he probably goes, I have no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
But he comes up with a good story. And, who's to say he's wrong? Everybody else is dead. So
yeah. When they're in, I mean, and it's like, that's what a lot of people, I think, don't realize about when you're in the heat of doing it professionally and stuff. And because I've had, and I haven't done it as much as you, but I've done a lot of different kinds of professional multimedia writing and comics and some other things. But it's like, man, when you're in the heat of it, you're just working and worried about deadlines. You're not thinking about like all this other stuff. And they're and people are like, what do you do about what writer's block? I was like, well, I want to get paid. So
I don't get it.
Yeah, it's like you just figure it out. It's amazing how writer's block goes away when your money is on the line.
That's exactly right. I've had people come up to me at conventions and say, so when you work on Gargoyles, did you create this character? And then they'll give me a name of a character. And I said, if you've got a picture of the character and show it to me, I will tell you if I can, if I did it. But I can't tell you by the name of the character. Because I didn't pay attention to their names. I was busy trying to figure out what they looked like.
Yeah. Well, especially as like the visual designer and stuff. Yeah, I was trying to. I was explaining that to my son a little bit too, because a lot of people just think. A lot of regular people just think that it's just like a sketch or whatever, and it's like, no, they have to do turnarounds from like different viewpoints and everything, so that everybody draws it the same.
Right.
and it's like because you know
all kinds of stuff, mouth charts, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
People
Yep.
don't even think about.
Yep. It's like this. It's a kind of like whatever they call it, like a style guide and different things and
Yeah.
stuff too. Where because you gotta match.
Call them
those things.
999 packs for some reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's the encyclopedia of how the episode's got to look, because the last thing you want to do is have people watching an episode and saying, "How come this one looks so weird?" You know, they've all got to look exactly alike. So we've got to give them all the information possible in order to have that happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you? I did want to ask, since you said Netflix. Have you seen Arcane?
I have not.
Okay, man. I was hoping you had, because it's pretty it's pretty stellar all around. Like
I'll look for it.
there's really
I
good.
did watch the What Ifs, because that technology is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
The Marvel What If series.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, you'll have to check out because it's been kind of like the big hit. I know with a lot of, especially like a lot of the I don't know, a lot of the artists and different people and stuff too, and I'm into that too, and it's some of it has a little bit of that kind of like painted textured look that they kind of map onto the 3D stuff, but like they do it really well. It doesn't look like some of the, and I hate it because I like some anime stuff too, but more than half of Netflix's original anime stuff annoys me with how the 3D animation looks, because it's just not quite there yet.
Yeah.
And other people have, but I mean, it's, I know it's a budget thing too. I mean, to be able to do that and make everything look as smooth and everything as possible, and people walk right and do everything, it's like all those things. It's like, and that's the thing. That's been the big thing though about Arcane, is it's like the writing is snappy, the kind of cinematography and different things that they do, the way they move the camera, the way they do like all this other stuff. And it's like, and the thing is, and like, I'm not into the app game thing, League of Legends, that it's based off of, but what they've been doing is, and it's kind of like what Gargoyles, and some people have said, like, it's like, man, Gargoyles like was almost able to create its own like cinematic universe, and that's definitely, that's what they're doing with this game, is because they've been smart enough to say, okay, we can actually make this more of its own universe rather than just a game here or a game there, like, and then we can like spend all kinds of stuff off of it.
Right.
But man, the animation and some of the other stuff, it is just done so well, and same with the music and other things too. But it's because the game is called League of Legends, but the show is called Arcane, and it's only, I think it's 8 episodes or something. But I was really blown away, and they do the characters so well with the way the characters move. And there's like in the second episode, there's one of the younger girls, she does this face where she's like that, and it like looks totally right for like anime. Like they totally like pull off stuff like that, and it's like, I was like, man, it's like it is really, really good. It has a little bit of that steampunk kind of vibe to it.
Yeah,
it's kind of like mixing I don't know, like Lord of the Rings with like steampunk. But it is, man, it is.
Okay, well, I'll look for it.
Yeah, but thank you for hanging out a little bit longer. I did want to pick your brain about some of the animation stuff, because I am really interested in that, and I like all of it. Like, I like stuff like Phineas and Ferb and stuff too. I think it's all really interesting.
Great.
Yeah. So.
All right. Well, anytime you need me, just let me know.
Anytime.
Yeah. Well, we can do this many times. It's very enjoyable.
Yeah. No, it's been great, and I guess enjoy putting up with Mike. Definitely send him your comic, because he'll definitely send you stuff he's been working on and everything too. And he loves seeing other people's stuff. So,
well, he's a great guy. I've known him for so long. We were both punks back in the day. All right. Okay.
I'll see you later.